This video game based off of Kanye West is secretly linked to a pretty serious cult. When you first load up the game, it seems like it's just another innocent, humorous indie game. However, 2 years after its release, some startling information was anonymously posted online that would forever change the way that this game was perceived. While playing the game, you could come across an unnamed NPC. And when you start a conversation with him, he asks, "What do you want to do?" You're given 6 character spaces where you can type anything you'd like, but if you type in the word ascend, you'll be teleported to a hidden level and given a cryptic message. It tells you that the game you've been playing up to this point is just a front. It asks that you not share this secret level with anyone. It informs you that the following level is a thought exercise and welcomes you to your ascension. At this point, I'm sure you've noticed the game keeps referencing ascending, and there just so happens to be a cult referred to as Ascensionism. This is their logo, and you can find it in both the game and in the trailer. And if you ask me, this is a pretty concrete connection. The game starts to get a little bit more ominous and threatening as you progress. After entering 33 hidden codes in a computer scattered all across the level, you're congratulated on your ascension and asked for one last password. If you do some more decrypting, you'll find the password and be met with this screen, where they give you 2 options. Either close the game or give them permission to interact with you and your possessions. If you say yes, then they ask for your name and address, and once completed, the game thanks you and tells you to wait for further instruction. As far as we know, this is the end of Kanye Quest 3030.
Do you believe in ghosts? He killed a 13-year-old girl and then said that her spirit haunted him for over 30 years until he confessed. Carrie Jopic was a normal 13-year-old girl. She was creative, talented, outgoing. She had lots of friends. But she was 13, she was a teenage girl, so she was rebelling a little bit at this point, but it wasn't anything serious or anything abnormal. Despite her teenage rebelling phase, she was still very much like a young girl, like a little girl. She was very much a 7th grade girl. The day before Carrie disappeared, she went to the mall with one of her best friends. They bought matching outfits that they both planned to wear to school the following day, March 16th, 1982. But that school day was anything but normal. Only a couple hours into Carrie's school day, Carrie actually got suspended for 3 days. When she was in art class, a boy threw some paint at her and it ruined her brand new outfit. So Carrie got up and she hit the boy in the face and she got suspended for that. Carrie was seen crying after this, saying that she was dreading to go home because she was afraid of getting in trouble. The school called Carrie's mom to tell her that, her daughter had gotten in trouble, she had been suspended, asked if it was okay if Carrie walked back home from school, or if she would rather come pick her daughter up. And her mother said it was okay for Carrie to walk home because it was just around the corner from the school to Carrie's house. It was only like 2 blocks. But the 13-year-old Carrie never made it home. At first, her mother thought that maybe her daughter was just stalling, coming home because she was afraid of getting in trouble. But as the hours passed, she started to get really worried. Her mother called all of her friends to see if her daughter was over at any of their houses. She started to search the neighborhood. Eventually, she even went door to door asking if anyone had seen her daughter. But when there were no signs of her 13-year-old daughter, Carrie Jopic was reported missing. Like many missing children in the 80s, investigators thought that maybe Carrie had just run away. Maybe she had an older boyfriend no one knew about. Or maybe she was just afraid of getting in trouble and that's why she didn't come home and she would just be home later. Of course, they did investigate a little bit. They talked to Carrie's biological father, they talked to Carrie's stepfather, they talked to her friends, her teachers, but investigators only really had one suspect, and that was Carrie's best friend's older brother, a 17-year-old boy named John Mant. John Mant was older than Carrie. He was 17 years old. He was already in high school. He already had a criminal record. He had gone in trouble for some petty thefts. He was definitely seen as a troublemaker. Reportedly, he already made romantic passes at Carrie, and he only lived right across the street from her. And investigators heard rumors that the day that Carrie disappeared, John Mant actually skipped school with a group of other older kids, and they threw a daytime party at John Mant's house. And there were rumors that Carrie was actually at that party, and it was the last place that she was ever seen alive at. But investigators didn't have any proof that Carrie was at this party. It was all just rumors. So they brought the 17-year-old John Mant in for questioning. He denied any involvement. He lawyered up pretty fast. And since they didn't have any evidence against him, they just let him go. And then very quickly after this, the disappearance of Carrie just went cold. It really went nowhere fast. They had no leads. The case definitely just went cold, and it was like that for nearly 2 years until remains were found by a contractor that was hired to do some work on the backyard of one of Carrie's neighbors. That contractor said that the area smelled terrible and they only had to dig about 5 inches down before they came across the remains of 13-year-old Carrie Jopic. And those remains were found buried in the backyard of Carrie's best friend and Carrie's best friend's older brother, 17-year-old John Mant, who obviously was the investigator's prime suspect. So you found the body in the backyard of your prime suspect. Case closed, right? Well, no, because John Mant still denied any involvement, and he actually seemed genuinely shocked that Carrie's remains were found in the backyard. And without any evidence, they let him go again. They were able to determine that Carrie Jopic had passed away from her neck being broken, but they couldn't determine anything else since her body had been buried for almost 2 years at that point. And only a couple days after her body was found, the investigators received a tip from one of her neighbors who witnessed something really odd the day after her body was discovered. This neighbor actually saw another teenage boy in the middle of the night, 16-year-old Jose Ferrara, crying at Carrie's burial site. He was crying, praying, and screaming, "I'm so sorry." Does it get any more suspicious than that? 16-year-old Jose Ferrara was also seen as a troublemaker. He was an outcast. He was a big partier. He was also allegedly dabbling into the occult at this point, and he only lived 2 houses down from the backyard that Carrie's body was buried at. When he was brought into questioning, he also denied any involvement. He said that him and Carrie were just friends, so he was obviously upset about her passing, and it made him extremely depressed. After the tragic discovery of Carrie's remains, Jose Ferrara befriended her entire family. He got very close to them, but especially her mother. He went over for dinner. He was there for family game nights. Jose cried with Carrie's mother. He mourned with her. He grieved with her. And they did that for over 30 years. They became lifelong friends. They had a lifelong bond after Carrie's passing. And as for Carrie and her murder, this is really going to upset you, but her murder went unsolved and cold for over 30 years. Until 33 years after Carrie Jopic was killed on October 11th, 2015, around 7 a.m., a call came into the local news station, and on the other end was a man who coldly and calmly said, "I'm ready to confess to a murder." And on the other line of that call was now the 50-year-old Jose Ferrara. He not only confessed to the news station, but he also called a crisis hotline and his estranged wife to confess to all of them that he had been the one to kill Carrie Jopic, and all of them contacted the police to report Jose's confession. When Jose was brought in by police, he was very polite, very cooperative. He made a full confession. He told them that the day that Carrie died, there was a party at Joe Mant's house, and he was there along with a bunch of older people, drinking and using substances. And Carrie had just gotten suspended. She was walking home, but she was nervous about being in trouble. She was trying to stall going home, and as she was walking home, she heard the music and all the noise coming from Joe Mant's house, so she just walked into the party. Her and Jose got to chatting. He offered her, she wanted to garden with him, and then after a little bit, he asked her if she wanted to go down to the basement with him and hook up. According to the 17-year-old Jose, the 13-year-old Carrie agreed to go to the basement to hook up with them, but as they started walking towards the staircase, she decided that maybe they shouldn't, and she actually said to him that she didn't think it was going to be a good idea. While the two of them are standing at the top of the staircase, Jose, who I guess didn't want to take the rejection or no for an answer, started to get really aggressive with the 13-year-old girl. He started screaming at her that they were going downstairs. He tried to push her to go down the stairs, and she actually fell down the stairs from Jose pushing her. And on her way down the stairs, Carrie Jopic broke her neck, which killed her instantly. Jose claims that he did not know that Carrie died right away. He thought that she just hit her head and it, knocked her unconscious. So in his own words, he decided to seize the opportunity and have his way with her. It wasn't until after he was finished that he realized that Carrie was not breathing. He says he panicked. So as the party is going on upstairs, he dragged Carrie Jopic's body into the backyard where he digged a shallow grave and buried her. And ever since that night, Jose claimed that the spirit of Carrie Jopic haunted him every single day for 30 years until he couldn't take it anymore and he had to confess. But even though he claims that her spirit was haunting him until he confessed, He then tried to plead not guilty during his trial, saying that the entire thing was an accident. And since the investigation was handled so poorly and so much time had passed, and since there was no physical evidence, they were not confident that they were going to be able to make a conviction stick. They actually offered him a plea deal. And the plea deal was 7 years in prison if Jose pleaded guilty to second-degree SA. It means he was never even officially charged in the death of Carrie, but he did agree to this. And he was released only 5 years later in 2022, which is just absolutely disgusting. That just horrifies me. He's out right now. He only had to serve 5 years, and Carrie Jopic got a death sentence. From what I can see, Jose Ferrara is still living in Milwaukee, and he has registered as an SA offender.
This is a woman people are calling the real-life Gone Girl. She faked her own horrific abduction and wasted 5 years of police time. You're not going to want to miss this one. It is absolutely insane. This all begins November 2nd of 2016. Keith Papini returned home from work at around 5 p.m. He was expecting to come home to his 34-year-old wife, Sherry Papini, and their 2 kids, but they weren't home. Keith then called the daycare where the kids were staying that day, and he asked them when Sherry came to pick up the kids. They then told him that she never came. So the kids were okay and he went to pick them up, but where was Sherry? He basically immediately reported her missing to the police. She seemed to have vanished out of thin air. The police immediately took it very seriously. Soon after, news stations started reporting on it, and her missing posters were all over California.
Bring her home. Just bring her home. Bring her home safe. There's a $50,000 reward.
That interview is heartbreaking and infuriating when you find out what really happened. Because there were no leads at all, basically, all the fingers pointed at the husband, Keith. Everyone thought it was Keith. He even took a polygraph test and passed it, but still, no one believed him. That's until 22 days later when Sherry returned. 150 miles away from where she was last seen, a driver sees her walking on the side of the road in chains. This driver immediately called the police and she was brought in. She was covered in bruises and she had lost weight. Her back had been branded. Understandably, the police were shocked. And when they asked her what happened, she claimed that 2 Hispanic women abducted her. According to Sherry, these 2 women said that they were going to sell her to a man and that's why they branded her. Sherry explained the abuse she had been through in detail. She also explained in precise detail what the room she was kept in looked like, and the faces of these women who abducted her. So much detail that the police were able to create a composite sketch of these women who don't exist because it was all a lie. Police found it a little bit weird that these captors just let her go, but that's not to say that they didn't believe her because they did take this case very seriously. They were determined to find out who did this to this poor mother of 2. The government even helped pay for her therapy to help her with her PTSD and anxiety after this incident. During that time, police were testing her clothes and they eventually found DNA. But this DNA did not belong to a woman. It belonged to a man. And Sherry claimed that she didn't encounter any men during this kidnapping. They put this DNA through the police database and nothing came up. That's until 2020 when they decided to put this DNA in a genealogy database, hoping that the perpetrator or someone related to them used Ancestry.com or websites like that. They use these databases to solve a lot of cold cases. And lo and behold, they found who the DNA belonged to. And this person was Sherry's ex-boyfriend. This man's name was James, and police quickly showed up at his door with a lot of questions. And it took a while, but eventually James started talking. He claimed that in 2016, Sherry got in contact with him, claiming that her husband was extremely abusive. James told her that he was willing to help her in this situation, and she instructed him to rent out a car and come and pick her up. James thought that he was helping Sherry disappear to get away from her abusive husband. During these 22 days that Sherry was missing, she was actually sleeping in James's bed while he was sleeping on the couch. He claimed that it wasn't long before Sherry started acting erratically. She would stay in his room in the dark. She wouldn't eat. She was losing a ton of weight. She would sit and watch the news reports reporting on her disappearance. And that made me think, like, she probably watched that interview with her husband. How could you watch your husband go through that and watch the world blame him for it? It's beyond messed up, but not as messed up as this next bit. He then started hitting herself with a bunch of objects to create bruising all over her body. And in a very Gone Girl fashion, she chopped a bunch of her hair off. She took it so far that she broke her own nose using a hockey stick. And to add a little sprinkle of effed up to this whole situation, she then asked James to brand her. And he was like, no, I don't want to do that. Sherry begged him to go and get the supplies to do this. There's evidence of this, by the way. Loads of it. Most wild and unhinged of all, Sherry had a secret Pinterest board where she was researching what branding tools to use on herself. And this Pinterest board was called Gift Ideas, so that no one would think to look in there. It's screaming Pinterest mom meets Gone Girl. So yeah, eventually James helped her brand herself. I don't know what she said to convince him to do that, but they did it. And then apparently one day, it was actually Thanksgiving, she just decided that she wanted to go home because she missed her kids. So she just got James to drop her off in a remote area. Some of you might be thinking, what if James is the one lying? But there's a lot of evidence backing this up. James did a polygraph test and he did pass. Also, police realized that the room that Sherry had been describing, the room she was kept in during her abduction, was James's room. That's why she was able to describe it in such perfect detail. She was just describing James's room, but adding things like boarded up windows and chains on the floor. She was just adding these details to an already real room. Pretty sure she said that she was chained to a closet. So yeah, she was just describing James's closet, but there were no chains or anything. It was fake. Mind you, when they're piecing this all together, it is 2020. It all happened in 2016. That's 5 years of wasted police time. Police then brought Sherry back in, sat her down, and told her the information that they had discovered. And I'm just gonna let you watch it because it is wild.
In this situation, the reason why you can describe the room is because you stayed in the room in the dark for hours, for days on end. The reason why you lost so much weight is because you stopped eating. The reason why you got a rash on your arm is because you cleaned his house. The reason why the brand is because he went to the store, bought the branding tools, and branded you. The reason why your nose was broke is because of a hockey stick. I know all of those things.
Safe to say they had her cornered. She tried to play so dumb. I actually couldn't watch it. It was actually despicable. She kept saying, wait, he's the one who abducted me? Don't play dumb. Don't play dumb. Honestly, though, justice for Keith. I feel so bad for her husband. He was completely tricked. And he stood by Sherry, all those years. Only to find out that she faked it? And did that to your family? Sherry eventually caved and she admitted that she lied. But she never said why. Attention? I guess? And why did she say Hispanic women? A lot of people were mad. She went after a minority to blame. Sherry entered a plea deal and she only got 18 months, which is not enough in my opinion. Keith divorced her the moment she was put in jail and he has custody of the kids, thank God. She had to pay a fine of $300,000 to make up for that money that she got from the government for the therapy. It's awful that she wasted all of that police time because someone out there needed that time.
Could you imagine being 53 years old and getting a Facebook message that you're someone's kidnapped relative? This little baby girl was found alive 51 years after being kidnapped. Alta and Jeffrey Highsmith married very young and within a year were welcoming a little baby girl named Melissa. Sadly, the joy of welcoming a little baby did not last very long. Alta really struggled with being a new young mom, and her and Jeffrey were fighting constantly. Jeffrey admits that at this time he wasn't being a good father or husband. He was young and selfish, and this led to him and Alta splitting up. Alta and little baby Melissa moved in with a roommate, and at this time were receiving no financial help from Jeffrey. Alta was struggling. Now she's a young single mom with no money. She needed to find a job and she needed to find one fast. And she ended up finding a decent job, but they did not offer daycare for baby Melissa. So Alta took an ad out in the newspaper saying that she was looking for a babysitter, and really quickly she got a response from a woman who was interested in babysitting little baby Melissa. This was 1971. You couldn't just look someone up on Facebook or Instagram to see if they were a weirdo. But Alta did ask this woman if she could meet up the following day, so she could just meet her, ask her some questions, but that woman never showed up. That woman did end up calling Melissa a couple hours later, apologizing that she didn't show up, and said she was still interested in babysitting Melissa if Alta was okay with it. And at this point, Alta was desperate and out of options. She had to start this job the following day or she was going to be fired. She needed that job so she could support herself and her baby. So against her better judgment, she agreed to hand over her baby to someone she never met. The next day, Alta left to start her new job, and she asked if her roommate could hand over baby Melissa to the babysitter when she got there. Shortly later, someone did come to the door and introduce themselves as Ruth Johnson, Melissa's babysitter. That person was in the home for only a few minutes before they left with little 22-month-old Melissa. Something really interesting about this Ruth Johnson person is that Alta's roommate said that this person could have been a man impersonating a woman. That babysitter was meant to drop little Melissa back off later that evening, but they never did. Little 22-month-old Melissa Highsmith had just been kidnapped. Alta obviously blamed herself, but so did Melissa's father, Jeffrey, because he wasn't financially supporting them. The grief of losing their baby kind of pushed the two of them back together. They ended up remarrying and having 4 more children, but they never got over losing Melissa. And it was always this super weird thing for their new 4 children, knowing that they had an older sister that was kidnapped, that they never got to meet. And as social media and the internet became a thing, it was actually Melissa's siblings that were posting and pushing to keep her story alive. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children actually made an age progression photo of what Melissa might look like as an adult, and they started getting a lot of leads, especially of women that thought they could be baby Melissa. But they never were, and every single time the DNA test came back as negative, it destroyed Melissa's family a little bit more. Then at the end of 2022, so not even that long ago, a tip came in from South Carolina that someone said they saw a woman that kind of looked like Melissa's age progression photo. Sadly, this woman was not Melissa, but for some reason, unlike all the other times, Melissa's family felt hope that they were going to see Melissa again, and they were right, because within 1 month, Melissa was reunited with her family 51 years after she was kidnapped. Melissa's father, Jeffrey, put his DNA in one of those genealogy websites, 23andMe, and it showed that he had 3 grandchildren that he did not know. There was only one explanation. These were Melissa's children. They ended up tracking down the mother of these children on Facebook. Melissa was going by Melody Walden, and they messaged her. Could you imagine being 53 years old and getting a Facebook message from someone saying that you're their kidnapped relative? Melanie, messaged them back and said, "I'm so sorry, I'll pray for you, but I'm not the woman that you're looking for." But she decided to do some digging into Melissa's kidnapping. She said she was shocked to realize that little baby Melissa Highsmith had the exact same birthmark as she did. Also, when she looked at her baby photo compared to her baby photo, it was like the babies were twins. So Melanie confronted the woman that raised her, and that woman admitted that back in 1971, she bought her on the street for $500. The past 51 years of Melanie's life were a lie. Her name was a lie. Her birthday was a lie. She finally got to be reunited with her real parents and meet her younger siblings. Something that was broken in all of these people began to heal. Obviously, it was still a bittersweet moment for all of them. Alta and Jeffrey lost out on 51 years of their daughter's life. Not only did Melissa have to come to terms at the age of 53 years old that her entire life was a lie, she also had to realize that she lost out on a loving family. The people that bought Melissa were extremely abusive, and she ran away from the home at 15 years old and had to work the streets as a teenager to survive. Today, as far as we know, they are a super, super loving, close family. Melissa even legally changed her name back to Melissa, which I thought was really, really sweet ending to this story. Unfortunately, the statute of limitations for Melissa's kidnapping expired over 30 years ago. So even if they found the people that kidnapped Melissa, they would not be able to be brought to justice.
After spending 8 years in prison for attempted murder, this monster would fatally strike again. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is 1 Minute Murder. Larry Lawrence Singleton had served 8 years out of a 14-year sentence for the attempted murder, dismemberment, and rape of 15-year-old Mary Vincent. I have posted that case if you're interested in listening to that. After his release, Larry would be moved to Florida, where he grew up. On the 19th of February 1997, a house painter who was working a couple of doors down from where Larry lived would witness something harrowing. He peered through the front window of his home, where he witnessed Larry completely naked, covered in blood, ferociously stabbing into a now limp woman's body. This woman was 31-year-old mother of 3, Roxanne Hayes. Roxanne was a loving, devoted mother who struggled with addiction. She'd done sex work in order to provide for her children so that they would never have to go hungry. Roxanne was stabbed by Larry at least 7 times, and deep scratches that were discovered on him proved that she had fought for her life against him. At his trial, he stated that Roxanne had agreed to come over and that he was going to pay her $20 for her services. But when he allegedly caught her stealing money out of his wallet, he flipped and ferociously stabbed her to death. Lawrence Singleton would be found guilty of the first-degree murder of Roxanne Hayes, and he would be handed the death penalty at age 70. However, he would die by cancer in prison before he was executed.
If you guys want to talk about the worst mom in the history of moms, let's talk about the case of Diane Downs, who literally attempted to murder all 3 of her children in order to get a man to fall in love with her. So what exactly creates a monster like this? Well, Diane was born August 7th of 1955 in Phoenix, Arizona. Most of her life, she was pretty well behaved, but she started to rebel against her parents around high school. She cut her hair, had a really edgy phase, and got super boy crazy. And she started to date guys, which was way outside of her strict family's rules. And she fell in love with a boy named Steve Downs. They were high school sweethearts, but the second that college hit, they ended up going separate ways. He joined the Navy, and she went to Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College. And while they said that they would stay faithful to each other, she immediately started to hook up with other guys when she got there, and was expelled for her promiscuous behavior, and had to go back and live with her strict parents. While Steve came back, he forgave her, and they ended up running away together and getting married on November 13th of 1973. They were known to fight constantly, but in 1974, they had their first child together.